Morning.
Good morning, Jen.
Good morning.
Good morning, Dawn. I don't see you yet, but I hear you already.
We're in our subtle bodies.
Subtle bodies, okay. Right. All right, there are a few more. Wait a minute.
Okay.
Promote panelist and Jayesh and Gita Shri. Promote panelists. This is the old system of the webinars. Yeah. Namaste, Gita Shri, you are muted. Yeah. There are only few of us, so we can unmute ourselves. We don't need to be muted at all. We can make noises because only a few of us make noises. All right. We continue our exploration, yes, of the Veda. Let me project the thing. All right, here we are. So we looked into the beginnings. It is less important from the point of view of some kind of scientific knowledge, yeah? But it is much more important from the psychological approach to this knowledge. And if it is not totally understood or accepted or pondered upon, then there is hardly any chance for us to understand anything much in the world. This is the beginning of creation. How the night came into being, why we are dealing with subconscious and inconscient being in us. What is this? What are we actually? Why do we have something in us which is totally aware of the truth and something which is totally unaware of it? So we have this dual personality. We have the surface being which is stupid, doesn't know anything, and there is some inner being which knows everything. And in between we have the whole range of relations. Yeah? More aware, our mental is more aware, our vital less, our physical is totally unaware of anything. Or we are unaware of the physical. And our surrounding consciousness is even more distant to the knowledge. We have no idea what it is about. And we try to study the world, can you imagine? Applying our senses to it, looking at the outer world and trying to figure out how it works. Without any awareness, yeah? Totally unaware. And so all a surprise for us, constant surprise of discovery of some meaning. So why this duality of total kind of unconsciousness and total consciousness, and in between the whole world? And we are both ends of this paradigm. So because we inherited the darkness, yeah, we took it onto ourselves. This is how Veda answers. Because he entered himself by himself. Himself who is fallen, he entered by himself who is aware of himself. Yeah? And that aware one is within the one who is unaware. And that is the beginning of all evolution. That's what we looked into the last time. Anytime you want to say something, you just say. I'm just reading from the Gita, the same passage, similar passage, which is very difficult to understand unless we understand this Vedic beginning. And that is Uddharet Atmanatmanam, Natmanam avasadayet, Atmaiva Hyatmano Bandhuch, Atmaiva Ripur Atmanach. Uddharet, one should raise oneself by oneself. By Atman, one should raise. Natmanam avasadayet, one should not put down oneself by oneself. Atmaiva Hyatmano Bandhuch, because the Atman, the self, is the friend of oneself. Atmaiva Ripuratmanaha, and oneself is the enemy of oneself. So we can be the enemy of ourselves and we can be the friends of ourselves. And then one more shloka. Bandhur Atmatmanastasya yena atmaivatmana jitaha. The one is friend to oneself, by whom the self is conquered by oneself. Natmanastu, na anatmanastu shatrutve vartetatmaiva shatruvat. But if one did not conquer oneself by oneself, one hates oneself as the enemy hates. So this is something interesting to see, that he uses Atman twice, yes? To raise oneself by oneself, to love, to be the friend of oneself, and to be the enemy of oneself. And the one who did not conquer oneself by oneself hates oneself as the enemy. So this is something interesting to think of. Who is the self to conquer the self? And here we are, this duality. There is this self which is unconscious and the self which is conscious. And the conscious has to conquer the unconscious one, and then they become friends. There is no other way to be friends. There is no other way to harmony. All the problems of humanity are the problems of harmony, says Sri Aurobindo in the Life Divine. The first paragraph. The problems of harmony of what? Of the inner and outer self. So here we are with these two selves, two creations.
So, in other words, Vladimir, in a very lower way of speaking, I don't know how to put it, when they say you need to love yourself, it could also mean that unless you love yourself, how can you love others?
It's a tricky thing. I always wonder about it, to love yourself as you are. How can you love yourself as you are if you're a transitional being? Right. You have to love the truth in you and not something which is untrue. How can you love things which are not meant to stay, or misplaced, or untrue to the future or to your real being? And here we have a problem of general psychology of love yourself, and indulge in everything, in every desire, and love your desires, and love your stupidities, and be who you are. You are what you are, and all this belongs to the misunderstanding of this duality of our being. Once we have understood this, I think we would never have this problem. Yes, one should love oneself, but by conquering the darkness within oneself, or without oneself, let us say, and within and without. If we conquer with our light, then the love will be normal and natural and automatic. There is no need to specially love that self. Many people approach this love as some kind of willing action. For example, you have to will to love. It's not possible, because it will fall into that I love you back. It will fall into that formal thing which has nothing to do with love. Yeah. It's a pretension to love. This is the unfortunate part of it. Love is a real thing. It's a power. Power of the truth. One can be... Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I always find it very, very helpful. I think what you said just now is key. You cannot will in the ordinary sense of will, in the egotistic will. Well, you can't will anything from the ego sense of view. But in terms of love and aspiration, silence, even rejection, the Mother Tree Bindu seemed to talk sometimes as if rejection is primarily a matter of mental will. But I think Sri Aurobindo was really clear, and this applies to self-love too, capital S or small l. In one of those letters later in Basis of Yoga, he says, you can't really reject when you're standing in the personality. And in a way, when you get back to the true being, you're already naturally not identified, so you don't need to, you have the will of the Purusha. But I'm saying, I think in terms of what Gita Sri is saying, that, self-love. So I'm walking around and I see some movement and I have a vital judgment. Oh, this is bad, right? Okay. So I think, Vladimir, what you're saying is rather than just doing the opposite, having a vital emotion or attraction, oh, that's okay. I can find the truth in me, which already sees the underlying harmony and the distortion of that vital movement. I don't need to do anything. I just need to let go, get back to the true being, and there I may have an intuitive opening to the true movement underlying that vital movement. That's my sense of it.
Yeah, lovely. I agree, actually.
Yes.
But this is already so much working, so much thinking, so much introspecting, so much failing many times in order to arrive to a certain kind of formula, how to actually get out of that trap. The moment you start judging, there is another force of darkness enters. You stop judging, there's another white lies comes, which is also painting everything in these beautiful colors, and there is no truth in it. So all these, the ego is so sophisticated, so well trained to pretend to love, to perceive the truth and so on. So to get out of it is quite a task. So,
I think, recognizing the distortion and rather than, trying to cover it over with love, to step back and see it as a temporary movement, as a part of a process of purification. So sort of to bring an understanding and compassion to it so that it can move on, because that kind of stuff is so toxic and stands in the way of progress. And I think that whole movement of self-love is probably born out of that heavy tendency to, criticize and judge ourselves and everything else. So it, it went overboard and just, opposite distortion, but somewhere in the middle, there's, the truth to it.
Yeah. This reminds me when Jan did her presentation for the Sangha a week or so ago. There's a talk Mother gave in 1912, early one. I've always found helpful balance because part of me loves the simple devotion offered to Mother, and part of me loves the psychological, stepping back and seeing. And if you're in that mode of like calmly, quietly stepping back, seeing the judgment, seeing the, the self-hate, right? And you step back. I find over the years what happens more and more spontaneously with no effort is that the act of stepping back opens the being to the force. And suddenly Mother becomes more present. And so the Mother wrote this thing where becoming conscious is important, and consecration. Consecration alone does not give you the details of what to reject. Becoming conscious alone is very dry and won't take you anywhere. But you always have this balance. And I find that with rare moments of wisdom, rather than me trying to find, another trick of the ego, I'm going to find the balance. That if I keep relying on her, that there's a movement to become more conscious, inspired by her. There's an opening of the heart inspired by her. So always remembering she initiated this as well as completes it, I find very helpful.
I think what Jan and Don said are very appropriate, because when we are on this path, Vladimir, we are given so many tools by the Mother and Sri Aurobindo to put into our life and practice it, you know. Yes, we are just human beings and we are not perfect, and the ego and the desire and everything come in. But when we know, like both Jan and Don said, to step back, recognize that darkness coming into us, then we can deal with that, with all these, and maybe try to purify ourselves a little bit every day.
A little bit, yeah. That's the key word. Devik, I'm joking. I will be joking more and more, but don't. So, yes, I agree with every word you say, and agree means, do you need my agreement altogether? I agree with what you say, yeah, not with you, but what you say. So, because we are analyzing what is happening to us in general. I know that to reject is very difficult. Rejection is the most difficult part. You can aspire, I can aspire, but to reject, it has to fall back. Somewhere Mother says about this, when it is already lived through and it's not interesting anymore, it just falls away from your path. This is the rejection in my view. To reject it forcefully, of course, there are certain things you must reject, like cruelty, falsehood, lying. These things have to be rejected. And it's easy to reject them. But there are subtle things which are more difficult to reject. They live a long time with you, the habits, kind of expectations, all kind of stupid things which are kind of enduring the rejection, cannot leave you so easily. Some kind of evening meal, for example, chips and chocolate in the night, or something, some stupid, very minor habit, and still it is there. And most probably it has to, for example, for me, alcohol, I was drinking quite a lot when I was young, all kinds of beer, with my youngsters, it just fell off. When I was 25, it disappeared, and I was never craving, never interested. And whenever there's some social drink and I have a little drink, I don't feel good about it. That's it. That's the end of the story. The rejection took place naturally. I have no problem with that. So I don't miss it. The same with leaving meat behind, becoming a vegetarian. No problem whatsoever. Neither fish, no meat, no craving, no interest. So there are certain things which are easy to reject, but because they are not important for you. But certain things, for some reason, they're still kind of there. Yeah, as Ramakrishna was keeping chocolate, for example, attachment to chocolate, and he was explaining it in a very interesting manner, that he keeps it because he wants to come back from samadhi to the life. The explanation was kind of I can recognize it in a way. I would explain that thing the same way, because I have to come back to something good in life, and that was the chocolate. Otherwise, he would disappear in the samadhi. So,
We have that problem too, right?
oh, I'm sure that's we can always find something to work on, but certain things I would like to reject, really. Certain things I would like to have a force to, when Ramakrishna had this kind of attachment to sexual desire, for example, and he was so frustrated with it, and you know Ramakrishna's stories quite well, most probably. So he went to the temple, to Kali temple, he usually went, and he blackmailed the mother. He said, if you don't remove this thing from me, I will commit suicide, and it will be on your this. And it disappeared. Kali listened and removed that thing from him. So from the divine look, maybe it doesn't look like a big thing, but for him it was an obstacle. It was a kind of, a big problem. So he got rid of it. But he couldn't get rid of the cancer, for example. He died from the cancer. Throat cancer. So there's certain things which are questionable with all this rejection but I would love to get rid of few things, to become free, never to think, never to be drawn to anything of the kind. These forces, it's all on the vital level. They're forces, they're troubling you. You have to deal with them. You have to spend energy with them. So I'm just sharing with you.
Yeah, this is very helpful to me. Even at this late date, after many decades, I still find myself at times very, very drawn to the simplicity of Advaita. I'm just reading the Ashtavakra Gita, the Heart of Awareness, just like forget everything else. Don't be concerned about the vital. Don't be concerned about any of this. Just be the self, right? And it's helpful to be reminded, when you talk to Advaitins, Swami Sarvapriyananda is the head of the Vedanta Society in New York, and he'll say, well, those things you're concerned about, Vladimir, that's just let it go. You're free. You're already the self, right? So it's helpful to be reminded how profoundly different Mother Sri Aurobindo's yoga is.
Yeah. Much more complex. It's a yoga of transformation. Today I had this talk on the yoga of transformation. My God. So this is something which is very different than you just jump into yourself, pure self, and forget about the rest. You don't need to be that. You don't need to deal with that. You don't need to put it in the right place. Just forget about it.
Right.
Cut it off. Clean it up. So, but then it doesn't make any difference for the world and why you are here. It's a kind of escape, as Sri Aurobindo says. He calls it escape brings not the victory and the crown. So this is the line from Savitri, and it's true in a way. So one can disappear in that, you remember how the beginning of the adoration of the Divine Mother starts, yeah? So he dissolves, the ego is dead, we have done with faith and this and that, and then he hears the voice. Oh soul, it is too early to rejoice. So here we are. It is too early to rejoice even after that. But it would be nice to have it. I totally agree with you. And I started with Buddhism, and I still miss that simplicity of the task. The task is much more complex for us. But once you know the truth, you can't get rid of it. You cannot simplify the task anymore. That's the problem with us.
Yep.
Okay, so we finished with all this overview of the first and second creation, the plunge, yes, of these first four emanations. And in the mother's story, in order to repair the fall of the first emanations, the Supreme Mother Aditi delegated out of herself the force of love, which has plunged into the darkness of the first creation. In the Vedas, it is Agni, the divine will, the first avatar, who lay down and hid himself within the darkness, the immortal among mortals. It is because of his presence that everyone and everything is evolving, seeking after the higher knowledge of the Supreme. So there is the cause of all evolution. There is the truth within the darkness hidden. And by the way, this is the secret of the Veda. Since we are dealing with the Veda, Veda knew about the truth within the darkness, the light within the densest darkness. It is what Sri Aurobindo discovered himself when he went into the inconscient and started to dig. He was digging into that infinite rock. Yeah? Infinite rock is the image of the Veda, the densest darkness. He describes this in Savitri. And by digging into it, he broke through. And from there was the supreme light beaming through. So this is the something which no other religion knows. Only the Veda and Sri Aurobindo. At least I didn't find it anywhere. No, in Christianity, nowhere that there is within the densest darkness, there is the supreme light. So that light is to be recovered. There's something interesting from the psychological point of view, that into that light it draws light to itself, as it were. The panis, what we call the indriyas of action, karmendriyas, our legs, our hands, our speech, procreatory organs, they are all built up from the darkness on the ground of this light. And they are constantly grabbing the light which is arriving to us. Suppose I am meditating and receive some insight, they grab it and hide it into the subconscious cave. They pull it into the darkness. So the whole vision of the Veda was to invoke the higher powers of the divine and to come with them and to destroy that cave and to release the hidden light which is stored there for generations and generations. Yeah. And that hidden light has to be released. The herds of the sun, the new dawn has to be born and revealed. The new sun is to rise from the darkness. This is what Angirasa rishis did together with the gods. They destroyed our subconscious cave and released the hidden divinity within us. I think this is the major transformational myth of the Veda and the secret of the Veda. So the light is not only above, the light is also below. And this is the secret. The light is everywhere, actually. We are in the bubble of light. So this is the picture of this avatar made by Hulta from the mother's sketch. You know, when mother saw this being lying down at the bottom of this densest darkness. So for the first time, this being opened its eyes. It's neither he nor she. Yeah? And this is the first avatar because of whom everything moves forward. So the evolution, the soul of the divine is here slowly awaking out of its involution and concealment in the material inconscience. This is the simple definition of evolution from the synthesis of yoga. A soul of the divine is here slowly awaking. And the slow awakening is an evolutionary process. There is a beautiful work of Sri Aurobindo, maybe you know it, The Involved and Evolving Godhead. He wrote it in 1930, after Arya, when he was already in seclusion. It's a very short, brief, like 3-4 pages article, The Involved and Evolving Godhead. So he involved himself into his own darkness and evolves out of it. So we read this. He sleeps in the atom and the burning star. He sleeps in man and God and beast and stone because he is there. The inconscient does its work. Otherwise it would not work. It would disappear into the oblivion. Because he is there, the world forgets to die, though it is not. And it is still forgetting to die. So this involution into second involution, I was long ago showing you this scheme, you remember? The several involutions, devolution, we discussed devolution. So the first fall of the first 4 emanations is here. Here they fall. And then the second involution, this is our souls came down. The number 13 is the first death of the involved being. And then this is evolution, towards the supermind again. And there will be the third involution, the supramental descent or the supramental manifestation, which will reconcile between the spirit and matter, between our surface being and our inner being. That polarity will be removed, and there will be again evolution, but evolution from light to greater light, from supermind to the greater supermind.
Evolution in truth rather than in falsehood and ignorance.
Right. That's why I put here 22 again. 22 in 22. Those who know the occultism and the Semitic tradition, they would immediately say, wow, what is this? If you know exactly Arcanum, 22 laws of existence. It matches so well. It's a very good proof that there was once, long ago, pre-Chaldean, pre-Vedic tradition, from which both come into being. All right. So I go ahead. So according to these two, involutions and evolution, the terrestrial evolutionary working of nature has a double process, and definitely must be double, because there is something which is darkness, the surface being, which is to be evolving, and there is the inner being which involved is to be evolving, to be able to stay here in time and space. That projection, that plunge, that psychic being which was projected from the unborn self. So there is an outward visible process of physical evolution with birth as its machinery for each evolved form of body housing its own evolved power of consciousness is maintained and kept in continuity by heredity. And that is what our genome, we pass our genetic modifications to our offspring and they pass it forward. So through time, through our children, we pass forward all the changes of consciousness which we acquired. All those, what do you call them? Those changes which are not necessarily very powerful for genetic code. There is a word for it. I forgot. Sclerotic. I'm becoming more and more sclerotic. Yeah. So the modification of genetic code as suggestion how it should behave. And those suggestions are taken slightly and genetic code is behaving differently.
Epigenetics?
Epigenetics, yes. I forgot this word. So this epigenetics is something which is amazing because it's not only from your experience, but from experience interaction with the environment that you modify certain reactions which are included somehow in the modification of the whole reaction of the opening and closing certain, genes or not, or combining them in a particular way.
There's actually very, very good scientific evidence, which most scientists don't pay attention to because it's too controversial. But the parapsychologists have studied animals, and they clearly see non-material field effects in genetics. And they've known this for decades, but no one wants to pay attention to it. But yeah, it's been verified over and over again. In humans,
yeah. With animals, it's more visible, especially pets. Pets are changing totally. They are becoming like close to the human beings in every way. They lose their sense of that, instinct altogether. They trust human beings to the extent that they don't follow their instinct anymore. So there's very, very powerful change. Yeah. So, and the pets of the pets, though their kids are even more like that. So, so we are producing new species in a way. So human beings are influencing this animal kingdom. They become very different. Yeah. That's why it was so important to have progeny for the king, that lineage, to keep the lineage, because that modification in the king's lineage is so important. They were valuing it. It's not about blood. It's about actually genetic modification. Blood is a word for it. Yeah, it's my blood, kind of. So, and there is at the same time the invisible process of soul evolution with rebirth into ascending grace of form and consciousness as its machinery, reincarnation. So incarnation and reincarnation, these two. And they are both being modified. So it's like, if we imagine it, so if I am born here in this body, so I passed the genetic modification to my children, suppose, or maybe not to my children. Just the vibration of my genetic code is such that influences all the vibrations of other genetic codes in other beings living with me, or knowing me, or speaking to me, or something, which is already kind of indirectly through environment makes modifications or new propositions. So in a way, me being here and having these experiences is modifying the future development of genetic code. So my children will have children who have children. So my grandson becomes my grandfather somewhere in the future. And I am taking the body then, which is modified and I contributed to this modification. So I am embodying myself into the body, my own body, in time. Yeah. So my body is stretched in time over generations to pick me up there, more suitable for my development now. And at the same time, my soul learned a lot from mental, vital, and physical being, how to be here, how not to be, what to do, what not to do. And that also is inherited by me. This is the second part of this evolution. And I'm coming with new plan, new expectation to a new body more suitable for my development. This is how evolution takes place. When we speak about Darwinian, we speak only about the first part, without knowing about the soul, anything. That the soul is also evolving here and moving forward. We speak about the body, the genome, the survival of the fittest. Why the fittest has to survive? Why the fittest? What's the drive? Yeah? This was never answered. Why not the weakest is to survive? I don't know. It's just a word for me. Nothing is explained here.
Right.
Or everything is explained and nothing is known, as Sri Aurobindo says. So they explained everything, but nothing is understood. But again, that's in our course with Spirit Calls Nature, by the way, there are very good answers there, that they do not look for the meaningful, outcome there, for the aim in life. They think that life is dragging by itself somehow, and that's it.
Yeah.
Such view would not be. It's like a belittling of human spirit, actually, making us small and insignificant.
There's a wonderful, it's very brief, there's a wonderful instance of a Nobel Prize winning physicist, Steven Weinberg, won his Nobel Prize in 1977. And 25 years later, a friend of his says, Stephen, science doesn't explain anything, it only describes. And he never thought of this. He'd won a Nobel Prize, he never thought of this. So he wrote an essay for the New York Review of Books. And he concludes, to his horror, that his friend was correct. There's no explanation. But here's what he says. I don't care what philosophers and scientists have meant by the word explanation for thousands of years. We're scientists. We can redefine the word, so by my definition, we do explain it. So basically, you have science as it is now telling you nothing, no understanding, and no explanation. It beautifully, beautifully describes patterns, limited patterns. But this great Nobel Prize winner admits he has no explanation for it. So to maintain his vital ego, he has to redefine explanation.
But at least he is honest. It's beautiful to see somebody honest who knows with his limitations. But if he would claim the whole thing, the truth, that the truth can be only described, and there is truth in it, what he says, yes.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Only it is not the whole truth. Yeah, it's just a very big part of it. Okay, so here we are, double process of evolution, which is kind of important for us. So Sri Aurobindo, in a different way, describes this double process, this double creation. Brahman, says Sri Aurobindo, has projected in itself this luminous shadow of itself and has in the act begun to envisage itself and consider its essentialities in the light of attributes. I'm sure you know all these quotations from the Life Divine. He who is existence, consciousness, bliss, envisages himself as existent, conscious, blissful. This is the metaphysical language. Very different approach. I love it, because if you have several approaches and you understand how they work, then we would appreciate the precision of explanation. So from that moment, phenomenal manifestation becomes inevitable, because if existence wants to be existent and consciousness conscient and bliss blissful, then you have it. He wants to be, not just what he was alone looking around and didn't find anyone. He wanted to be someone with whom he would have relations. So the unqualified chooses to regard himself as qualified. The one becomes the many. So he avoids this double creation here by explaining the very need in becoming of existence. The Brahman becomes the Atman. By the way, this is a good explanation of why Atman and Brahman are used in Indian philosophy. Brahman is that existence, consciousness, bliss, truth, mind, vital, prana, annam, matter. This is Brahman. But Atman is Annamaya Purusha, the material self, the vital self, the mental self, Manomaya Atma, as Taittiriya would describe, Vijnanamaya Atma, the supramental self, the blissful self, the conscious self, and the Sat Purusha, the one who is self. So we have Brahman as the horizontal, as it were, and as vertical Atman. So each spot, each dot on this horizontal line is the self.
Okay, I have a question about that. This is so far beyond the mind, but I'll try and ask it. It seems like that's one way of understanding the Brahman, but if Brahman is the divine that's all, isn't the divine both the horizontal and the vertical?
Absolutely. And that's why they say Brahman is Atman, Atman is Brahman. And there is no way. Only the Brahman is the self-aware. Yeah, he is self-considered being. Whereas Brahman is everything, awareness as it is.
Okay.
But self-aware being is Atman. Of course it is Brahman. Yeah? It can't be anything else but Brahman. But that focal point, that local point of that self-awareness makes it Atman, self.
Got it.
So self-aware Brahman is Atman.
Yes, thank you. That's clear.
Yeah, so here I just was showing the same thing. And this is spirit, existence, consciousness, bliss, supermind, mind, life, matter. And this is the self, divine self, Satpurusha, Chaitanya. I use Purusha, but I could use Atman in the same way. Now, there is a difference between Atman and Purusha, and we also have to look into it. Atman is the self, self-awareness of Brahman. Purusha is something different, at least in the Vedas. Purusha was created by the self for the sake of manifestation. So Purusha has faculties. Atman doesn't have faculties.
Okay.
Purusha has seeing, hearing, speaking. It is all Purusha. Atman doesn't have seeing, hearing, speaking if he doesn't have Purusha. So Purusha is representative of Atman, of self, for the sake of manifestation, because without these faculties, manifestation is impossible. All right. Let's look into this. This is a pure psychology coming in our way. The true being may be realized in one or both of two aspects, the self or Atman and the soul of or Antaratman, psychic being, Chaitya Purusha. The difference is that one is felt as universal, the other as individual, supporting mind, life, and body. So we can imagine that, well, that the unborn self is universal and the inborn self is individual. So when one first realizes the Atman, one feels it separate from all things, existing in itself and detached. When one realizes the psychic being, it is not like that. For this brings the sense of union with the divine and dependence upon it, and soul consecration to the divine alone, and the power to change the nature and discover the true mental, the true vital, and the true physical being in oneself. Both realizations are necessary for this yoga. This is a very important last thing, that both realizations are necessary for this yoga, for integral yoga. So the realization of unborn self, separate from all things, never born, never will be born, never bothering about anything what is going on here. And that is nirvanic experience. Yeah? And the inborn self, which is very different, which is seeking union, love for the divine. This one loves, this one views, witness.
So I have, as you may guess, I have some questions about this.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Two or three things strike me. First, just taking the first sentence. I've always read it as two very different ways of realizing the Atman. One is, I guess, what you call in trance or not aware of the physical manifestation. And then there's a sense of not being localized anywhere. Just it's spread out, infinitely no location. It seems like when the faculties or let me just say the senses are active, that it's, now this is not the psyche thing, just the Atman. It seems that there's a sense of endless extension, but still there's some sense, it's not individual, it's not limited, but somehow this vast spread out existence is relating to itself everywhere through these, in relation to these senses. Does that make any sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. By the way, if we will develop this more in the direction you are now pointing, when we will speak about the faculties, because the faculties and Purusha are connected. So the seeing, hearing, these are the faculties of the self, actually, of the Purusha self. And the qualities of the inner involved being. And this is actually representative of we call it Chaitya Purusha, he calls it, but it is Atman actually. It is representative of Atman, which is still beyond the faculties of Purusha. And it manifests in the verities of sincerity, humility, courage, gratitude. These are the forces of the psychic being.
Right. That makes sense. There's one really quick one, and there may be no answer to this. I've asked it before, and I just want to say it. And can move on if there's no answer to it. It seems to me, and I've been investigating this a lot this summer, that this sentence that you said was so important. I came across this in 1976, and it always seemed, I was looking for an integration of devotion and knowledge. I never found it anywhere else but in Sri Aurobindo this way, and the mother. It seems to me that the first realization is either ignored, not by Mother Sri Aurobindo, but in the decades of integral yoga. And I wonder, why is this? Do you have any sense? Is it worth even talking about, or I just?
Yeah, it is. Sri Aurobindo never ignored it. Yes, he always insisted on this separation of Purusha from Prakriti. That's what you're referring to.
Right.
So the unborn self is to be experienced because, and he gives explanation why in the Life Divine. He says that because it secures all the other development. Yeah? It will give you this the field and finally this space. You can breathe and do things without being looking always over your shoulder for these forces, what we are struggling with, yeah,
Right.
which we were mentioning today. So you have to always deal with something, reject something, constantly deal with, and you fail every time because you do not have that realization of unborn self. Oh.
Why is it ignored so often in the presentations of the yoga? Or is it not worth that? I don't know if it's worth asking.
I think because there are some people who separated themselves on Sri Aurobindo and the mother people, you know, and you saw it in the ashram. Some people are saying that the mother is the most important, and so the psychic becomes more important, and the psychic birth is more important than the realization of unborn self. But Sri Aurobindo himself went this way. He first discovered the unborn self,
Right.
and later started his psychic yoga, you know, when the mother arrived, actually.
Right.
And later he changed when the mother arrived. He made it more clear that the psychic is better to concentrate on the heart, most probably seeing the people, seeing the crowds who came to be his disciples, that it is more doable for them than
Right.
separation of Purusha from Prakriti and going God knows where, some mukti, you know, denying life, because psychic is closer to the body. By the way, we also mentioned this, the luminous, subtle body, subtle physical, which is, I think this one is connected to the psychic being. This is the link which makes physical part of this psychic enterprise. Yeah, um,
Also,
there is more to learn here. Yeah?
Okay. Yeah.
sorry to
Thank you.
interrupt. Also, Vladimir, I don't know, it's my thinking. Devotion and love also is, you have to have that for the psychic being. Without that devotion and love, even in the Gita, that devotion has to be the root cause. I mean, that love for the divine.
Right, and that is the psychic. And this Atman has no love. That unborn self is separate from all things, existing in itself and detached and indifferent to whatever happens here. It looks at everything like in the movie. It sees everything like in the movie. Yes, you can feel something, but it is not really about you. So, and that freedom we need. We really need that freedom to fulfill this yoga. And then with this freedom, so you see, the unborn self views everything as the divine already,
Right.
and the psychic views everything as to be the divine only. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me. Yeah. This is very helpful. Let me address Gita Shree's. Yeah. So I find this to me, and this may be personal to me. I find in myself, and I think I tend to get critical and look outward and rather than see here, I find that it's very, very easy for this personality to create fake devotion, fake vital devotion. So I find, and this is almost instant, it's almost a few seconds. I found over the years that if there's a little turn toward the silence and the openness, the devotion comes. If I make an intention to go into my heart, it feels like it's always Don's going to be divine. And this may be just me, but I've checked this for decades, and it always feels a little insincere if I begin with devotion, because it feels like an effort. Whereas it feels like somehow opening to the silence, somehow it's an effortless effort. And when that openness comes, the devotion's there. And so I trust it's spontaneous. And that may be for me. When I teach meditation and yoga, I always teach it that way. It's like, this may be just me, but I don't trust Don's efforts at devotion. So I want to wait and let it come rather than, but that just, again, that may be me.
It is me also. What you say, it's exactly about me the same way. I don't trust devotion without knowledge, without discovering of the truth. If you don't love the truth, what devotion you may have, it will be some kind of exaggerated vital, feelings. And many times I see how people do this. I can't do it. It's like fake it until you make it or something. Yeah, something of the kind. You cannot fake the truth. You have to have a sense of it. Once you have it, the devotion is rising immediately in the heart.
I don't know how one can fake devotion. I just don't understand because maybe
Hare Krishna, Hare Rama. There are many of them going around, and they put themselves into the trance totally. Like they are already there. They're already there. And you look at them, they're only in the vital exaggeration.
I attended an African American church in the
Or
70s. And at
yeah,
first, I was just so amazed. They would get up and they would throw their arms, they'd be dancing and dancing. And little by little, they would say, "Oh, that's Sister Joan. It's now, literally, they'd say, watch, it's 11, it's 15 minutes at exactly that point. She'd get up and dance in total devotion." And you realized this was all a show. And
it's a show.
it seems so genuine. And I'm not saying it's always the case, but I live in the South now where, well, Vladimir does too. You'll be here too. You know, if you go to these churches, you talk to the Jesus people. I've heard them for 20 years. Oh my God, Jesus is my one and all, and damn all those to hell who don't believe that. That to me that's devotion without knowledge.
yes, but devotion that is like seeing it in others, judging the others, and that's okay. I was just talking about myself,
Yes, yes.
because it's been very different since we were children. So that has grown in us and it's different. So that devotion is something that cannot be explained.
There is interesting thing about this devotion, I must say. One can really, how to say, exaggerate it, and Vital loves this exaggeration. Vital wants to join. Mother speaks about Ramakrishna about this, the why Ramakrishna was in ecstatic dancing, and because something in his vital, weakness in his vital, was enjoying the truth. Some truth was there, but the vital was making an exaggeration. Yeah. And there is something interesting about relation of the mind to the devotion. The mind, which is very dogmatic and very religious, let us say, dogmatic, religious is nearly synonyms for me, because you are kind of formed your opinion, your views. We are all dogmatic, so I'm not saying that we are not. Even in integral yoga, we are kind of dogmatic. You find many dogmatic. No, not in integral yoga. So they determine what we feel. They actually determine. You can see the people brainwashed by propaganda in Russia, all these patriotism. You take patriotism, for example, not Russia, forget Russia. Take America. And you have that feeling, that devotion. So the devotion can be made available, so to say, but that subtle devotion you are referring to, the deep recognition of the divine present in all the beings in the universe, that gratitude which is rising from the heart, I think it is possible only with some recognition of the truth, that the divine is, that the divine exists. That is required.
But that is what
And I'm sure you're referring to it. I'm just adding more to the plate, about this. Kind of.
that is what I meant.
Yes, I know.
It's
In
not,
India, it's a very different story. India is a
not
bit
only,
different land.
it is not always only about the vital, about dancing and getting into a frenzy and all. No, you can even just on a normal day just sit and even just thinking of the divine with that devotion, it just tears just flow out.
Yeah, yeah. I know that very well because for India, living 27 years in India, it's a big. And when I come to the Samadhi, I always admire these simple people from the village coming, how they devotionally bow down to how they touch. I feel them. I feel total giving up, total surrender with no reservation, no the total concentration, absorption. And these are people just not properly educated, not intellectuals, not philosophers, just villagers, with flowers coming.
Sorry.
I saw the same thing. I was a Catholic church choir director for 10 years, and they're very, poor, poverty-stricken people from all over Latin America. And the simplicity and sincerity and the beauty of the devotion was at times, you know, without necessarily much quote-unquote knowledge, but there was an innate psychic true, it felt
Yeah.
to me, very true knowledge of what Christ actually represented. So yes, of course. And I should add, by the way, I know we're almost over, if you go to any non-duality group, you can meet any number of people who've read one book about Yashanti. Oh yes, I'm aware of the self, it's all this stuff. A friend of mine said he went to a non-duality gathering and this one girl kept saying, I am so full of myself. I'm so full of myself. And he said, boy, she didn't know how true that was.
It's like the scientists do not have the ego. They say we, something of the kind. When we were laughing together with Radha. We don't have ego. We are scientists. Yeah, India is such a beautiful country in that sense, and it is their mother says about this that all the villages around Auroville are much more suitable for this yoga and have much more love for the divine than all these Aurovillians intellectuals come. She said, it's written actually. So because somebody looked upon them as if they were inferior in some way, we are here, there, and they are there in the fields working. No, it's not like that. In the heart matters, it's totally different story.
Right.
So here there is no, and that's why both realizations are necessary for this yoga, not one, not only psychic awakening, but also the unborn self. They both have to come. It's like Mother and Sri Aurobindo. Sri Aurobindo is, as he describes, I am working from the higher over the head and over the mental and vital consciousness, and Mother is from the heart over the vital and physical. That's why we are both, as he explains in the letter, we are both in this yoga, because they have to provide the connection from the higher realms to the physical. And these both are necessary. This is Mother and Sri Aurobindo. Both are necessary. One is not enough. It's amazing. Yeah, amazing. So even psychic is not enough. And as he describes in the Life Divine, or the nirvanic experience is not enough for this yoga. For many other yogas, it would be more than enough.
Even in poetry, when she finds her soul.
Right.
On page 527, the finding of the soul.
How you find your soul, both.
Yes, but after that she has the all negating absolute.
Experience.
Yes, nirvana and all negating absolute. What a powerful thing. Yes. Can forget how he says, step back from form and name, annul thyself, that only God may be. This is an important realization without which integral yoga is impossible. So we should understand that and never say never. Never choose only one and say that this is what it is. So I totally agree with Don. It's belittling that realization is leading nowhere. Okay, we can stop here, I guess. Somehow we are going slow. I thought we will finish the whole thing. There is triple transformation waiting for us, and then it will be over with this introduction, how these involutions created all this world in which we live and what we are dealing with. And you can see immediately here, one is unborn and the other is inborn self, and their work. So inborn within certain environment of mental, vital, and physical consciousness, which is to be transformed and changed. Okay, I stop here. Close with mantra.
Vladimir Jayashree couldn't join us. She just, poor thing, she just got COVID.
Oh my God. So
she's resting.
Oh, I wish her recovery. So
Give her our best, our love and best wishes.
I will.
yes, send her our love and care, and she should yes rest, deep peace in mother's presence. Mother says the best way to get out of it is peace.
Yes.
Absolute peace.
Yes.
Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschit Dukha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.